Richard, say a few words about yourself.
Yes, thanks, Piorti. First of all, I really appreciate being here, but also that you're all able to speak English with me. I'm unilingual, and I really admire people who can converse in more than one language. So, thank you for that. Uh, I started teaching ages ago. You can't see my picture, but I began in 1966. So I've seen a lot of development or non-development in education. A lot was happening around the time that I started teaching. We had a report that was done by the government of Ontario. Ontario is a province of Canada, and it stands out to me still as the best government document on education that I've come across. It was called Living and Learning, and it was very focused on the well-being of students, so the health of them, their humanity, and if that report had been implemented properly, we would have a different landscape in education today. The problem is that there's a little saying that you don't assign to people who made a mess the job of cleaning it up. And essentially, what happens when the government does a report like that, they expect the people who made the mess to then implement the report or to clean up the mess they made. And so the report never got implemented properly, but it still stands as a great document. It reads today as fresh to me as it did back 50 years ago. And so we have this situation where all this time, education hasn't changed. And to me, we just had school board elections here in Ontario, and I was out trying to create change in my location in Ottawa. And my experience was that people are less informed of real alternatives in education than they were 50 years ago. And so my conclusion there is, as I work with this problem, I've gone through a process of transformation myself, which is what all teachers have to do. I was a teacher, still am, I guess. And we have to transform ourselves, not just transform the school system. Every teacher has to become a different kind of person, have different relationships with students if we want to get public education corrected. And so I went through a long process of transformation. And when I say that, I didn't have the help of the internet and all the resources that we have now. There was very much a feeling of being alone in the change process, everything having to be discovered. And so it really wasn't until about 1990 when I ran a program that I'll talk about later today that I felt like I completed my journey. And the completion of it really required lived experience with students who were more free to follow their passions. And so it's from that program that I ran, which I think I described it to you, Piotr, as an accidental program. It was one that another teacher and myself presented to the principal, who was just the right kind of person to help us with it. And yet it turned out to be something that was beyond what we had intended it to be. It's become a window, I refer to it as accidental, a window into how we can go about transforming public education. We're going to need an awful lot of help from outside the public system, a lot of pressure put on by people outside it to get it to change, or it's going to we call blow it up. It's going to become privatized, and that's not what we see as the advantage to or the most advantageous way to proceed. If we can reboot public education, that would be the best option at this point. So I'll leave that as introduction and then respond to questions that you might have.
Lovely. I have so many questions, so many ideas. Intentionally leave a pause because I'm so talkative usually. I really don't know where to start because one big thing which hits me is those parallels with Danny Greenberg and with Tom Dury I mentioned. Somehow so many important things happened in 1966. Like it was some kind of, maybe that hippie movement. How is that? Why was this such a magic year? But yeah, maybe you tell me why was it so much good? How come there were so many good things happening in the late 1960s?
I think things were building at that point. We had the Vietnam War and all the uprising, the hippie movement in the U.S. So people were being forced to think differently, to look for solutions other than what they were normally inclined to look for. But also around that time, A.S. Neal published his book called Summer Hill. That was published in the early 60s. And I think you're familiar with Summer Hill. Is that right, Piotr?
That's right. I read it regularly.
And so that came out in the early 60s. And then also John Holt, who's referred to as the father of homeschooling or unschooling, published his book, I think it was 1964. And so the thinking on education was brewing very much at that time also. That report that I mentioned by the Ontario government was published in 1968. And I had been teaching for 3 years at the time that report came out. I didn't know about the report. I was teaching in the province of Quebec, so we weren't plugged into Ontario. Plus, the connection between provinces was not that strong, and there was not much in the educational establishment. There was not all that much discussion taking place. So for myself as a young teacher in the classroom, I was not getting informed of the philosophies of education. I was just being taught to be a dispenser of curriculum in the classroom to deliver what was always there. So basically a tradesperson with supposed skills of how to dispense the curriculum. This educational thought was not part of my training, and I was freshly out of teacher college at that point too, and was not introduced to this kind of thinking. But it was happening on the outside. And in 1968, a book that very heavily influenced me was Education and Ecstasy, which I didn't discover until about 1970, I think. And what happened for me, and I started teaching 1966, and almost immediately I was thinking, I can't spend my life doing this. There's something wrong. And after 3 years, I just had to take a break. I went and traveled for a year. And as background here, my father was a higher up in a big school board at that time, the one that I was working for. And so for me to quit teaching out of dissatisfaction with a father who was a success in the system, there was quite a disconnect there. We maintained good relations, but we had this difference of opinion on education. And so Education and Ecstasy for me, written by George Leonard, explained perfectly all of the dissatisfaction I was feeling about school. He starts his book off saying that teaching is an exacting and exhausting business. True. The process of damming up human potential is, and he goes on from there, but starts the book that way, that the school systems are damming up human potential. And that just rang true for me. So I couldn't put the book down after I started reading it. At the end of it, he presents a scenario that is very much the self-directed education scenario that Daniel Greenberg, who you mentioned earlier, he started his school also in 1968. So 1968 was a really big year from that point of view. Education Ecstasy, the government report called Living and Learning, and Sudbury Valley School being formed. And I got married that year. It was the year that sticks with me is very memorable. And so I quit teaching after 3 years. I then after a year of traveling came back and started teaching again. And then I read Education in Ecstasy, and I thought I can't keep damaging kids like this. So I quit again, gave a copy of the book to my father, and father, being in the system and successful in it, he couldn't tolerate the book. He said he couldn't get past page 10 of it. It was so offensive to him. And that's something that we're up against now, that we have these career professionals who have been running public education, feeling that they're doing the right thing for young people, trying their best, and not realizing that they're in the wrong paradigm. And for them to come around to appreciating that what they've been doing all their lives as professionals is actually damaging, we need to understand that that's a really difficult journey for them to take, and a lot of them cannot even embark on it. My father did start to embark on it, but it was very difficult for him, and he didn't get that far along before the end of his career. And so we have that kind of situation that we're in right now in trying to change public education, that a lot of good people trying their best, but working from the wrong paradigm. And so that's a little more background on where I'm coming from, if you'd like to follow up on anything from that.
Yes, I think you provided lots of tidbits which add a lot of drama to my question, because actually it fits perfectly right now. So we have all those books today, which you say were breakthrough books in those days, plus lots of new books. We're not separated. Now we have the net, we have social media, we're connected. So in theory, we should have been moving in a more optimistic direction. And yet you say that you feel we're going backwards, with which I agree. However, I feel very young in the field because I woke up to this drama perhaps 10 years ago. You practically dedicated your life to the cause, and you see it going in the wrong direction, which itself could be pretty depressing. So my question is this: why? You partly answered speaking about your father, but let's all ask this question: why is it happening? Why is it still happening that we try to control the children? 1862, Lev Tolstoy said that this system invented in Prussia is wrong, bad, and harmful. And 160 years ago, so many great people already dead, and we are going backwards.
There was A.S. Neal, who started Summerhill in 1921. It was John Dewey talking about experiential education at the end of the 1800s, early 1900s, defining this other way of young people getting an education. And yet here we still are. And I went through a period of being highly frustrated with what seemed like the inability of the educational establishment to pursue new directions. And then I read Thomas Kuhn's work on the scientific revolutions, the nature of them, and he coined the term paradigm shifts. So um, the whole science of paradigm shifts and how paradigms compete and how dominant ones work to keep contenders at bay. That all rang true for me, and I was able then to put into historical perspective this challenge that we're in at this time to actually transform education. We have to shift paradigms, and all of what Kuhn presented to us about the difficulty that people have changing paradigms, it perfectly applies to what we're going through in education. The Copernican revolution serves as a great example for that. And I wrote a little essay. I'm working on a several part essay called Rebooting Public Education. In part two of that, I try to put the whole situation today into that historical perspective where we have two competing paradigms, one being the authoritarian one that we're all schooled in, and then the other democratic one, which Peter Gray talks about, Daniel Greenberg talks about, and so we have the two of them. I don't know if you know of Yaakov Etch, the Israeli person who first called a school a democratic school. He's been on the scene since the 1980s, and he has helped to found in the range of 30 publicly funded democratic schools in Israel now. So there's progress being made in some places. We have what are called alternative schools here in Ottawa as well. They're really not alternative at all because they're being run by people who really they're not disciples of the democratic school paradigm. They're trying to force fit alternative education into their paradigm, which doesn't work. And so people are saying that it's not alternative enough. And so in that historical perspective, and that transition that people need to make from being in the authoritarian system, which is described by a lot of people as an extrinsically motivated system, to go back into an intrinsically motivated way of learning, which is natural learning. That's Peter Gray's approach to it. In order to make that transition, we have to go through this process of deschooling. And so that relates to what Ivan Illich was saying in the early 1970s with his book, Deschooling Society. We need to get around to that deschooling. What we're up against is that paradigm problem that the disciples of the dominant paradigm do what they can to keep contenders out of sight or keep it discredited. And that's the problem that we're in now. How do we change that? And some people are saying it's hopeless. You can't change public education. They're too fixed. And yet public education that's the tool to really build democracy and community. And if we start letting that fragment off to people choosing their own things, we're going to end up with very much a me first society where in Canada, we do have some private schools. The average tuition for a private school is somewhere between $12,000 Canadian dollars per year. Some of them charge $50,000 a year. And so if we let school fragment off into private operations, we're going to be creating many classes of people from the wealthy to the the least privileged. So a public education system is is something that we need if we want to promote equity and inclusion. So I don't want to give up on it. I want to see what I can do to change thinking on it, but I don't believe it will happen from within, from the point of view that the motivation for change will not come from within. They're too fixed. There are too many obstacles that we have to mount on the outside. A massive change, a massive pressure on public education to change. And I'm starting to think that it's not going to happen by being nice, that we've got to fight fire with fire, and that we've got to mount somewhere challenges to that old system, actually take school board or two to court for damaging children, for acts against humanity, crimes against humanity, which when you look at what you've written about the brain research, Priority, we're doing to kids in school can be defined as crimes against humanity. And if we can get enough people who see it that way, that we can crowdfund a court case against a school board somewhere, that would go a long way to waking people up if we can get ourselves organized that way. And that's really what my work is right now, to try to get us united globally, that we can actually mount some serious challenges to the old way of doing things, even if it's just supporting people. There are people who are fighting systems. Peter Hartkamp, who I think has come to your attention in the Netherlands, has had to battle his governments. There's a group in Luxembourg, Kati Zagu runs it, battling the government there just to have homeschooling legalized, and also a lady in South Africa battling there, have her democratic school recognized. And when I say recognized, I think you're going through the same kinds of problems in Poland. Maybe we can you can fill me in a bit in a moment on that. But these battles that people are having just to be able to do something different than what is being done, we can get ourselves united globally, then we can bring support to efforts like that from the outside, get political change. And it might not happen overnight, but you've got to wake the world up so that we can at least start electing people that will create the change for us, or not create the change for us, but that will move change that we would like forward with our support. We're inclined to think we just need the right politician and everything will be okay. And it's not going to work that way. It's going to have to be a case of every one of us who wants change to get out of their armchair and stand up and start getting active. Just one last comment before I get some feedback on this. There's this, I just lost my train of thought there. Sorry, too much going on.
Jump in.
Let me just see if I can get it back here. Yeah, it'll probably circle back. We'll leave it at that for now. But I wonder, Piotr, you said that things are terrible in Poland right now from the public education point of view. Could you give me a hint of what the problem is there?
To say things are terrible in Poland is a little bit unjust to Poland, because Poland is still a great place. It just happened that we have an awful freedom-limiting bill on the table, which is to be signed by the president within a couple of days. However, I hear this fighting spirit in you, and this is extremely optimistic, because I also wanted to inject a couple of optimistic things. You're saying we need a paradigm shift, and you mentioned the Vietnam War, how this reactivated thinking about many aspects of how the society works. And I think we now have had this pandemic. Now we have Putin's war, and all those things taken together make people a little bit apprehensive of the future and make them rethink their lives and society and how the global community works. And this might be one chance, perhaps not in a million, but in a decade, to really push for some change. You surprised me with thinking that courts might help. And the reason I've never been very optimistic about courts is I believe courts are populated by highly schooled people. Lawyers are those guys who usually get to the top by being rigorously schooled. So maybe that's why I didn't think much about courts, even though I will support it whatever way I can. But one thing about Poland, and this is a tiny, tiny thing, but perhaps an inspiration. The tiny thing about Poland is that last year we thought of a school strike. School strike in the sense that children who really hate school could just team up together, refuse coercive schooling, and this school strike actually started on March 21st, first day of spring, and died out very quickly because kids are just afraid of their parents and teachers. So I'm thinking if we could, if there is a chance to repeat the same thing, the same strike in Poland, this time with some help from teachers and some help from parents, and it should be much easier than last year, precisely because of this bad bill. Lots of teachers are in arms. They're very angry with the Minister of Education, with the Parliament, with some politicians on the right, in the middle. Parents are angry because their favorite school, best school in Poland, is being undermined by the new law. Students, as always, they are tormented. So perhaps it will be possible to take those three currents of dissatisfaction and somehow focus them on a single day, the first day of spring, traditional day of truancy in Poland, and try again. And what you're telling me today is incredibly powerful, because you practically say, I devoted my whole life for change. So many years of struggle, so much knowledge, so much care, analysis, and you see how this all slowly slips away. The great people like Danny Greenberg depart this planet. This is a civilizational tragedy. That's how I see it. So now we have this pandemic, Putin's war, bad bill in Poland, lots of anger. That's my tiny hope. I'm not sure if I can, see all those strings come together and pull in one single direction. But this meeting today is already very helpful, because it's a powerful illustration. And I hope Palace it's recording, because what Richard said about we need to take stronger action is extremely important, because if we don't, the system is sliding towards deeper and deeper authoritarianism, and the number of suicide is increasing. Bad things are multiplying. So yeah, I agree with the fact that if we don't take a tougher line of resistance, the system will evolve in the wrong direction.
And so I totally agree with that we have a tension in the world right now that, although it's a difficult time, the opportunity for change because of it is there, and can we capitalize on that? But I want to just acknowledge you saying, Petri, that Poland is a great country. we really respect how Poland has accepted in the Ukrainians that have had to flee Ukraine, the humanitarian help, the kindness of the Polish people. That's been an example to the world that's uh, just reflected really well on the Polish people, and so I agree that although you may have that law affecting education, that is not a good thing. Poland itself is a good thing. So I just want to register that I agree with that. The school strike idea. Uh, I've been involved in student protests, and as soon as the authorities within the traditional school system feel threatened, they get very heavy-handed. We had a valedictorian student who, along with other students, were upset at the behavior of a vice principal, and so they started to protest, and they had a website, and there was a newsletter that they were putting out that was very critical of what was happening in the school. And the way the authorities dealt with it was they suspended this student, a thinking student, the kind of people that we need. They suspended him. He couldn't come back to school, and he wasn't going to be allowed to be the graduation class valedictorian. And other parents were contacted and told that the same could happen to their kids if they didn't get them under control. And so the power of the system to squelch any kind of challenge to it is strong, and we see that happening in a bigger scale, just with what's happening with Iran right now, the way they're putting down the protests, and China putting down the protests there. When the authorities feel threatened, they've got that power, and the school systems are no different. Students get too aggressive, they're going to be disciplined in some way. What would be the pretension of allowing people to protest will be okay as long as it doesn't really threaten them too much. But it's a school strike by itself is perhaps going to be something that by itself doesn't have that much of an impact. I don't know if you know that there's been an effort to create a youth rights day on the 20th of November. That's been underway for a couple of years now. November 20th is the UNESCO Day of the Child, International Day of the Child, to celebrate the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And the rights of the child, the convention supports what we're saying. It's just not being enacted properly. But the idea of, can we unite globally on this one day, and perhaps student strikes all over the world happening. When I say all over the world, we've got to be careful with some countries, because some students will be more than just lightly disciplined. They could suffer some serious consequences. So we need to be sensitive to how are students going to be treated by the system if they rebel in some way. And so how we manage that it's responsible. The Youth Rights Day is intended to do that. How can we stand together to send a message, create some pressure, and not have the youth involved suffer undue consequences? That's part of it. The other thing, the idea of the court case, this is not court case by itself, is just part of the process. It's to create an awakening. The judges, Peter Hartkamp mentions how the judges are, how you describe them, Petrie, they're products of the system. They won't get this other way of thinking. But the process of bringing that suit to some jurisdiction with the support of the global community of people like us behind it. So it's not just one little court case in one little place. It's the showcase court case for the world that we've got to get out of this rut that we're in. And if we can unite around that, and we start to influence things in the court of public opinion, which is really where the change has to happen. And so just a little digression on this too. I was working with a professor at the University of Ottawa before the pandemic. He was in the Faculty of Education, and the class that he had was just about to graduate. They had been through their teacher training and been out in the field, and the professor had me working with him to present some of these alternative ideas. I don't like to call them alternative ideas, other paradigm ideas. So these students, they've been through all those years of school, teacher training, and they knew nothing about Peter Gray and the democratic education system. So there you have, even today, faculties of education only training new teachers to perpetuate the old system and not to transform it. We have a problem at that level as well.
Richard, you mentioned the possible repercussions against kind of pupils that would go on strike. What do you think is the chance of convincing parents to fight for their children? Because I think that's the biggest group that we have around education.
It's a really good question, and what's tended to happen is we have actually the question is very much before us as a civilization at this point. Putting it in Zach Stein's terms of a civilization, when a civilization is in trouble, it will either collapse or find a way to reboot itself. And so the question that we're really looking at is can we find a way to reboot our civilization at this point? The reason that I focus on education is that I firmly believe the idea that if you want to change a culture, you have to change how young people get their education. And so that we've got to get public education rebooted if we want to reboot our civilization. And where the parents come in here, the problem, addressing your question directly, is what I found during the elections that we had here. I spent a lot of time talking to people and knocking on doors, attending meetings, and we have this problem that the people who are most aware that way have given up on public education or don't have kids in the system. They have basically abandoned it. So I was finding at the doors people whose children had grown up, even if they had grandchildren now, saying, oh, why should I care? I don't have my kids in school anymore. They have no idea that our schools are creating the society that we have, and that we all have a vested interest in it. And then the people who have taken their kids out of school for homeschooling or private school, they're not interested anymore. Just leave me alone. Public education is a mess, and it's hard to get them actually fired up about helping to create change, because they've managed to find enough of a solution for themselves that they just want to get on with their lives in other ways. So that's part of the difficulty that we'll find. And so the question then is where are the people that that will mobilize, and what will it take to get them mobilized? And the Youth Rights Day, this last November 20th, I put a real concerted effort into going to what I consider to be the heart of this democratic school movement, and sent emails out to well over 100 people that I see as being right at the center of change in this area, with the idea that they sign a pledge, a Youth Rights Day pledge, which only required that the idea is, if you want to involve people, make sure that there's something in it for them, and make it as easy as possible for them. So this pledge idea was really just use the Youth Rights Day as an excuse to start a conversation with people in your neighborhood in order to reach out and get more people thinking, expand the conversation around education. And you can quickly turn the conversation to what you're doing. So it's not a case of you're promoting something else. Use it as an excuse to promote what you're doing. And so if you're running a democratic school, start the conversation with people in your neighborhood, and have you thought about the Youth Rights Day? Do you know what that's about? Here's what we're doing, and then you start talking about your own thing, and it's just to get the conversation going. I sent out well over 100 emails to people that I've met over the years who, to me, are change agents, encouraging them to get a snowball effect going. I'll try to activate the people that I know, and if you could activate people you know, and then we get that mushrooming throughout the world, then we might start to get ourselves identified enough that we can come together to really support the change process. What happened was less than half of the people that I contacted, and some I had actual conversations with, other people who liked posts about it, and it was posted in places where thousands of people should have seen it. There were less than half of the people that I wrote to personally and spoke to personally actually signed the pledge, and there was virtually no mushroom effect. There were only about 10 people, other than those who I contacted directly, who signed the pledge, which again was simply to say, I'm going to start a conversation in my community about this. And so how do we mobilize ourselves? And I'm at the point now where 50 years later, more than 50 years after Daniel Greenberg and all those other things we mentioned in the 60s happened, we haven't made progress. I think that what we need to do is stop blaming the school system and start blaming ourselves, that we're just being too insular, that we've got to get out there. And one of the problems that I see us up against is that people who run democratic schools they're not authoritarian. They don't want to coerce other people, force other people to do things. They just want to help people accomplish what they want to accomplish. And so they're not trying to force their views on other people. They just want to let it happen. And it's just, it's not going to happen that way. We've had 50 years of that attitude, and the other side is so strong that we're not making progress. And so we've got to come together and say, we have to team up here, fight fire with fire. Otherwise, we're the problem as much as the public system itself is. And so that's kind of where I'm oriented at this point, if you'd like to comment on any of that.
Yes, I think we have passed 45 minutes. Therefore, I would like to say that let's introduce a little bit of mess and chaos. Somebody wants to speak. Let's be a little bit more interruptive. We can be a little bit less respectful. I think, Richard, I will instantly inject some optimism because yes, I'm aware of your pledge and your effort, and that this is how we got closer in the meantime. However, I think I see a shining beacon of hope in social media, and the trick is to look for memes which ride on people's true conviction. In other words, look for ways where we do not need to change people's thinking, just use whatever is there. And the dissatisfaction is huge, especially among students. And I'll give you an example of two little events, two accidents, which taken together tell me that they are not accidents. We try to organize the school strike, and we look for all possibilities how to get to politicians, to parents, to students, to look for leaders. It seems like all the methods were failing for a long while, and like 1 month before the strike, we just stopped. Like, okay, there are 30 of us. What can we do next? Why are kids so passive? And then a girl, 14-year-old actually, she created a TikTok about the school strike with a very skeptical tone. They want to strike, they want to end school coercion. Do you think it makes sense? And this TikTok exploded to 1.5 million views, I think, in a couple of days. And the reason was, it was a very short message. It tickled the key emotions in students, and they were just tagging each other. So it was a meme that exploded instantly. Sadly, of this meme were fading exponentially. It was very, by March, that TikTok was almost forgotten. And there weren't any structures established in schools apart from those with which we had physical contact. I mean, we visited personally with leaflets, etc. So there was no structure for the school strike. Nevertheless, this flash in the pan was very interesting. Not so long ago, I think about a month ago, one of the leaders of the school strike created his own TikTok. Actually, his friend created it by selecting a couple of pieces of his speech on the day of, we call proclamation, Emancipation Proclamation. He said, end of school slavery, plus a few things. Why do we need to do, why did you listen to those old people who have no idea how we want to learn? This short TikTok, less than a minute, again exploded to nearly 1 million views in a very short time. So this tells me that if we ride the student emotion, they feel enslaved. If we ride the student emotion with the right meme, and we choose this specific moment in time, using November 20th, we think at this moment about first day of spring due to the tradition in Poland. If all students refuse to obey on that particular day, and this finally takes root in a sense that it transpires to the media, to global media in Poland, then perhaps we can overcome those situations like with this valedictorian who was booted from the school. So
You have me
Peter,
sitting here with a big smile, Piotr.
Tentam wanted to say something.
Yeah, Peter, I think that the problem with your strike approach is that you rely solely on kids, and even if you would have like kids' parents get interested into that, the ideas that you have behind it are not well defined and easy to be processed by parents. Because you have some ideas, I know of this wiki of yours and so on. I think this material needs to speak more like Richard mentioned, that it should be what's in it for them and how it can be made simple to them. Because when I'm talking to parents, because I try to talk mostly to them because I see the power in them. Problem is that they in many cases, I was surprised they understand the problem, but the reality is that they want to have a good future for their kids, and they just believe that they need somehow the system for that. If they don't have any alternative, like there is no alternative because, for example, they have no money, or there is no alternative because in their surrounding there is just no alternative school that they could take. There's nothing that would hold them into a strike because they just don't see any chance for change happening.
Yes, I must insist that I'm not the right person to speak to neither parents or perhaps students. I have good communication with students, but I will not convince parents because I'm too radical. I will not convince teacher because I'm triply radical for teachers. We need people who will handle those groups separately. And at this moment, I would say we're lacking in all three areas. And if you feel powerless, perhaps you're too radical too. Perhaps you're too far ahead. And I'm not sure if you're aware that with Łukasz, who's present, and Vitek, who is not present, we worked on such a proposition for the Roundtable of Education, extremely simple law that everyone can understand, which there are only 3 points. One is total freedom for kids. Number 2 is some help from government to start education for the educational start. And 3 is just not destroying what we have at the moment. If you can build a good meme from that 3-point new law, then perhaps you can tell parents, guys, we can throw away the 600 pages of messy law nobody understands, 250 pages of school statutes, and replace it with a single page of the law that everyone understands and everyone benefits from. A parent just needs to know how it's good for him. I would say it's great because kids will thrive, but this is not very convincing. So I'm not the right person to speak to parents. But maybe you.
Actually, Richard mentioned this thing that parents who are kind of aware of the problem, they escape the system. And to some extent, what's in Finland and what Seth Godin is saying about education is that the easiest thing to be done is just to eliminate alternatives. Then everybody is interested into fixing the system. What do you think about that, Richard?
It's too prone to authoritarianism.
Where that's the opposite vector.
Yeah, it creates a monopoly, and so I would prefer, rather than institute it, that we just figure out how to make public education everybody's first choice. Make sure it's choice, that it's everybody's first choice. There's nothing better than that, and the democratic learning model has the potential, the promise to do that if we can create public education on that model. I'm sitting here actually feeling very optimistic with a smile on my face, just the idea of the school strike and the memes, and then the connection with the parents. I'm not sure who was speaking there, but what you were saying, the other speaker, about the involvement of parents. When it comes to paradigm shifts, the one of the big messages that comes out of study is the whole idea of normal science and solving the problems of the new paradigm. When we look at the Youth Rights Day, that's just a very small scale idea or concept to be developed. It's had 2 years of building at this point. And so it's like the kitty hawk. It hasn't really taken off yet. It's had a little flight. It's far from a supersonic jet. And so the Youth Rights Day, though, that could be a global day, as was suggested here, for school strike, not just in Poland, but maybe with memes. And between now and next November 20th, we can have people like us here dealing with the problem of how can we orchestrate this massive worldwide student strike next November 20th. And the whole goal is to raise awareness of the other possibilities. The students, the fever around that meme that you were talking about, Piotr, if we can, the students producing things like that are put out in a timely way to really create a worldwide sensation with the next November 20th worldwide student involvement, we could accomplish a lot in just that 1 year. And I'm wondering what you think about.
I think we already have a little protocol on that we try first day of spring in Poland, and then we have an eye already on November 20th and the whole world. Yeah, I like it.
It's a case of bringing together the creativity of many minds to solve this problem. And you've certainly got me thinking about things I hadn't been thinking about before this call. And so how we stimulate each other to address this problem.
I would like to say one word to Tentem yet. And something, Richard, about parents leaving the system and not being interested anymore. I think in the case of Poland is a bit optimistic because we had a huge wave of abandonment of schools. Kids joined Szkoła w Chmurze, in translation, School in the Cloud, which is some kind of online platform. And they were extremely happy because the kids started thriving. They started learning by themselves. And this new bill is practically, in one of its parts, aimed against that school, against the freedom of that school, because that school was labeled educational mafia, just because they managed to accumulate 11,000 students within 3 years, growing exponentially, tenfold per year. Now, when the options for the school are being limited, I hear a great uproar from parents and a great push towards even greater freedom. I mean, the word unschooling is becoming pretty popular. Maybe I live in a filter bubble, but those things are really appealing to people who just take a good look at this. So if we manage to look for those memes that can in a very easy way address those needs and sentiments people already have, then I think we can go one step further this year by having a group of teachers, a portion of teachers and a portion of parents support kids. How it works out, does it die out again in 3 days? I'm not sure. But for sure we'll be smarter. We'll know a little bit more after this year. And now we have our new idea. Poland in March, the world in November.
Yes. So I want to stay being in touch like this between countries. We see what each other is doing and where we can create some inroads. But we have in Ontario the whole idea of that online learning. The government that we have here is oriented towards reducing the cost of education, and so it's looking at producing or offering courses online to students so that they can run the programs cheaper. And so you have that other motivation by a government, which is it's looking to basically dismantle public education by privatizing it. And in the background of this also is we've had enough people. Homeschooling is legal in Canada, and so we have a lot of people who have homeschooled, unschooled their kids, and there's an association, Unschooling Canada, which fights for those people. And the universities have started to realize that the students that they're getting who are unschooled better university students than the ones coming out of traditional education. And so they've been modifying their acceptance requirements so that now students they only need 5 credits that pertain to the program that they would like to get into to get accepted into university. And there's an example of one student here recently speaking at an information session who was unschooled all his life, never went to school, wanted to get into a university engineering program, ended up taking 5 courses online. These were university or ministry approved courses, took 5 of them online. Because he was unschooled, he was good at self-directed learning skills, so he was able to do these courses and achieve high enough grades on them that he got accepted into the program. So there's a student, never went to school, just proved himself with 5 courses, got accepted into university. There was another young lady talking there at the same time who also did not go to school. She ended up getting accepted by as a special student. 14 years old, she started taking a university course out of interest. And by the time she was 16, she had taken 5 university courses. And she was able to use that as a way to get into university. And actually, because her courses had been university courses, she got an advanced placement into her program. So she was entering into second year. This means that fear that parents have had that if my kids aren't in class every single day of their lives studying what teachers tell them to study, they're not going to be able to get into university. They're destroying their futures. And we now have this example of not at all, that if anything, not being in school is probably better for them. And so that's what's happening in this area, which is pretty positive.
So there is some advantage there is an advantage.
That is actually something that I'm also looking at, because I think amplifying those messages, like you said, that universities, because I heard also about Stanford being very kind for unschoolers, amplifying those and amplifying this histories of people that went out of the system and then, for example, joined it back for university, and that it works and that they get along. I think that's a place that we can build upon.
Yeah,
Yes.
but Canada got a better tradition and some space to develop such, unschoolers who can be an example. In Poland, culturally, it's very hard because we have never had an real unschooler, unless I'm unaware. We rather had everybody go through. I might be one of the guys who is closest to unschooling just because I never care about what's happening at school. But I had lots of education. People who look at my curriculum, my CV, may say, "Oh, that guy got lots of education, formal education." And the reality is this: I never cared, always did things my own way, and that was my formula for education. So very few people are as unschooled as I am, and I cannot even use myself as an example. Oh, look, what freedom does to you. Because they will look at my degrees and say, "Oh, look, that's not true. You're just lying. You've been schooled." So we don't have unschoolers to show as an example. But Tentem, I have a question. So are you pessimistic about the possibility of recruiting people like parents disappointed with the new Lex Czarnek law? Lex Czarnek is this new bill.
I think homeschoolers in Poland is like 30K, right? It's against 4 something million. So that's not an amount that we can talk about.
Okay, so let me speak about what I see in my own environment. Literally in the last 2 days, I got two new candidates to get to the school in the cloud, this huge online school. And those two guys, they talk to all the kids at school. Guys, I'm leaving. Bye bye. You'll be tortured here. I'm leaving. And others are getting envious. So this one guy, who is this less than the percent of the population, is doing a lot of noise. And those guys who get to Chmura, this school in the cloud, those guys make particular lots of noise because they ooze their happiness. And I think those parents who
But you see what is happening to school in the cloud. They are about to shut it down. So.
Yes. That's what Richard said. That the government immediately gets nervous for a million reasons. And in this case, what I'm saying is, we cannot be sure this kind of freedom can thrive without our assistance. But this dissatisfaction we can use to make sure that around the first day of spring, we had a huge protest in Poland.
I wouldn't build around the satisfaction. I would more likely build about the satisfaction, because as school in the cloud was about to have troubles, as this whole thing started end of October, the optimistic thing was that parents were describing their stories, and I'm actually a bit sad that that didn't resonate better, because there were beautiful stories about kids having suicide attempts because of school that went out of the system, that Chmura helped them to survive. I mean, it's about saving men lives, and if that doesn't catch up, I don't know what can.
You see, if you look at the revolutions, and we spoke earlier about Vietnam War, Putin, satisfaction, fantastic, lovely examples are great for intellectuals to read and contemplate. But to induce change, usually we ride on dissatisfaction. The large group of people is unhappy with the status quo and look for change. When they all put the vectors together, like in Iran at the moment, fantastic things can... fantastic, that's a very bad word. Great force can emerge. The great force can, at some points, can be a force for change. Like Orange Revolution on Arab Spring. They all use very similar mechanisms, which we might hope to employ in our case. Tentam, do we know each other from Facebook?
Marketing. I still think that marketing should be built as Richard mentioned, about the thing that you can gain. What's in it for me? Not about kind of I mean, finding a customer pain is one thing, but having a value proposition how to solve it is the thing that gets those people on board.
Yes, what's in it for me? That's absolutely right. And usually people start looking for change when they are unhappy with the status quo. That's why I'm... But I have a question. Do we know each other from Facebook? Because I would love to, stay in touch and communicate with your ideas. Do we know each other from Facebook?
I know how to find you. I'll reach out to you.
Okay. Because we're recording, but we can cut it out. Yes?
Yeah, we have to stay connected in this way. I didn't realize that the group here was not more tightly connected. And if I can just add to what was said, we need to be fighting on every front. And so I use the civil rights movement in the US as an example of it. We need the people who are highly negative, agitated, coming out and as critical as they feel they need to be, but really presenting to the world how bad things are. But then we need to have the other group that comes along and says, so how do we make the best of this? So you have the good cop, bad cop concept happening in the public groups, but we need both. We need the angry group to create the need for change. Then we need the group of positive thinkers to say, okay, how do we bring ourselves together on this? And Martin Luther King was still seen as radical, but because of people like Malcolm X, he was made to look really acceptable. And so if we make enough negative noise and create space for the people who are the negotiators, the diplomats, to start the change really happening. It's just, I'm just making the point that we need to be attacking from every angle.
Yes, and I think in case of Poland, the positive forces are all in place. They're all active and working. I mean, the writers, the thinkers, the scientists, ready to pounce in. If we only can use the satisfaction of those three primary groups, which I think are students, most of all, with a little bit of support from progressive teachers and from open-minded parents. And yes, we each time, I was a little bit hesitant about trying to expand our view to international view. But each time we meet new people from a new country, there are always some great ideas coming. So I think
I really love this initiative, Piotr. I was not kind of thinking that might work, but kind of joining it today, I think it's the right thing to do.
fantastic. I have one word to Palace. Palace, I think this recording, I think we have so many fantastic sound bites, especially from Richard, that I hope you record this all and save it safely, so no bad things happen to technologically, so that we don't have to restage it.
Yeah, no worries. I'm recording in two computers, just in case.
Excellent.
We had
Okay,
a mayor in Canada, Montreal, a major city here, and the mayor of the Montreal at one point said, "There are no problems; there are only solutions." And so to remain oriented that way, that there are solutions to this problem that we're facing, you never give up on it. And how can we orchestrate that change? The other thing that I'd like to leave you with is that we have got to get out of thinking within our own boxes, and in that case, I'm referring to nations even. This is not a Poland problem or a UK problem, a Canada problem. This is a world global village problem that we're facing. If we can get our minds into facing this problem as a global problem, civilization, if it's mortal, when it collapsed earlier, like the Roman Empire, well, it collapsed in just one part of the world. We're a global community now, and if our civilization collapses, it collapses globally. And so we need to be addressing our problems from a global perspective. And what's happening in Poland can serve as a great example on how to get things orchestrated. So with the coming of spring in March, use that example to orchestrate the global in November. I would really like to build on that. That's a great example.
Lovely. I will tell you maybe before we say goodbye. Maybe I'll tell you something which we might disagree. The difference between Poland and South Africa and probably also Canada, according to your words, is that we have a rather positive view of private schools. We don't have much. Many examples of rich parents and expensive schools. There are a couple of those, but they don't register much. We see a lot of alternative schools, and if you look at our 3-point law, the second point of that proposition is sort of basic income for students. I'm not sure if you support the idea of basic income, Richard.
Yes, I would.
Okay, so something of the sort of basic income invented by conservative thinker Milton Friedman as named school vouchers. Not sure if you use it in Canada in any way.
We don't have the vouchers in Canada. They are used in the US in places.
Yes. So the thing is that we predict that this could result in privatization of schools, but in a very positive way, especially that now the market for the needs of kids are very fragmented. In other words, there is less need for a school where I go and attend for a couple of hours per day. There is far more need to try something in one place, something in another place, do a lot of education online, do a lot of sports. So my thinking about public schooling is this, that I would like to lose focus from this label. Who is the owner? Is it the private owner, or is there is it a local authority, as it is in Poland, which the local authority owns most of public schools, as far as I can frame it. So the basic principle behind all this reasoning, this single-page law, is that we maximize freedoms. We maximize freedoms for the student, for the parent, for the teacher, for the principal, and for the owner. If it's a private owner, it's okay. If it's a local authority, it's also okay. Let them compete on equal basis. And I believe we can argue that maximizing freedoms on all fronts can possibly lead to pathology, because there is nothing better in an environment than human beings. What do you think, Richard?
Yes, a lot of thoughts generated on that. One in particular, there's the evolution. The democratic school, as such, is a step along the way. It's to give some salvation to people who simply can't stand being in the public system, and so for them it helps. It also, the democratic school itself provides that freedom to the learner and to the learner's family. The evolution, though, as I see it, is towards the idea of ecosystems of community learners. Schools, if they are to, I think the word school could end up disappearing with the idea that we create community learning hubs. And that's where the technology comes in to connect people who have similar interests, so that Zach Stein, I was talking with you earlier, Peter, Zach Stein, with his book, Education in a Time Between Worlds, mentioning how the computer would not be that machine that people log on to and they do their course online, but that it would be a machine that connects. And that's not to rule out that happening. If somebody has something they particularly want to learn it quickly, to go to a course and get the background that they want, but to humanize learning as much as possible, connect up people who have similar interests, connect up the novice with the expert, and get ourselves or that if you have two people passing each other on a sidewalk in a community, one's an expert at something and the others just become interested in it, that they don't pass each other like strangers, that they can find each other. And so you build communities of learners that way. The word competitive is, as soon as you get the idea of competition between private and public schools going, there's a little bit of an unhealthiness that creeps into it. We don't want to be competing against each other in that sense. We want to be working towards what's best for all of us. And so a problem that we have is with homeschooling and private schools, the majority of students in Canada, at least, well over 90%, go to the public school system. And if a parent decides to take their children out of that system, in effect are excommunicating themselves, the family and the student, from that bigger community. They become just outside that system. The friendships that the students have in that are different. And if we set up competition between schools, then we have we're working against that sense of community.
I beg to disagree slightly, but I'm sure we will find a common platform because I think
so.
I think it's just a matter of when I say compete, I am competing for your attention right now. It's just a word. I just we have lots of options and possibilities to group together to communicate, and we can say that we are competing for your attention and we manage to attract you. Tomorrow someone else will compete for your attention better, and you have to be somewhere on the basis of competition between points of value. And it's the matter of community. I think the arrival of social media helps the cohesion and establishing new connections, new friendships, entirely beyond the physical limitations of the local environment. Like you and me, on two different sides of the globe. So if I use the word compete, for let's say compete, I avoid the word market for schools. I try to say market of ideas, just for the sake of avoiding the divisions in reasoning about what schools are and how this competition looks like. So in a sense,
And so yes, I think we're just having trouble with language here, but not with basic concepts.
yeah, and I'll try
Ultimately, it's.
I'm also looking for
thinking
ways.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I invited more interruptions, so now we are having a little bit of trouble. So I try to learn a better language, how to speak about schools and change, and I need to juggle between convincing people and polarizing people. Polarization is also good because it sparks discussion. So I'm trying to use those polite and those polarizing terminology depending on the context. So we spoke with perhaps Gianna. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. Gianna from South Africa. She was also very worried about the concept of privatization because she got lots of examples of corruption in her country. So we had a longer discussion about that. In Poland, we are desensitized because when you speak about private schools, this is usually a talk about fantastic people, fantastic initiatives, who we want to support. At this moment, they are not always helped by the government, but great ideas, great schools. All kids, actually, the whole idea of school vouchers is to provide kids with some help, some basic income for education, and let them choose what's their best place to be, the best place to learn. So I call it competition, but what's the better word? Their choice. That's the freedom. So the whole concept of this one-page law is about maximizing freedom on all fronts and minimizing any form of destruction in the wake of freedom.
That's perfect. Yeah, instead of the word competition, choice is what I see, so that the individual learner chooses what works best for them. And you could say that it's competitive, that one person is providing a better course of action for them than somebody else. But to really keep the focus on choice for the individuals, that they can maximize their learning according to their interests. And
4% may be harder for comprehension, harder excuse because I've been immersed to talk to head and teacher in our effort. Hope is the right people organizing the school strike. They communicate in the messages. So I excuse things and the right words. In terms of public education, there is yet one difference between Poland and Canada. In Poland, it's so bad. On average, it's so bad that bad association, public education. So one of the leaders, actually no leader of the strike, he spoke very clearly. I want privatization because public education. So in this sense, you for sure have some disagreement. However, I beg him not to for any, but for schools attract more children because of their satisfaction. Children go to private schools, and thinking about schools, I struggle with admit more young students. Then a central control decree with of our schools.
What's the percentage of public school versus private in Poland?
I would say anybody from Tomasz. Tomasz is from Poland, and I think it's less than 5%. Yes, less than 5 is by private. I would need to go. You see, I didn't pay much attention to that. For
But
this
you have
one,
well over 90% in public education. Is that correct?
I would think so. Yes, I will tell you that in homeschooling, exactly we have 0.62%. This I was very interested in. As for
Have you met Derry Hannam from the UK? Are you familiar with him?
Yes, I'm familiar with the name, and he was generous enough to sign our petition to the human rights spokesman about removing coercion from schools. This petition didn't catch fire in social media, and it hasn't been yet formally submitted. However, if you think it's extremely important, I can make it happen in days, literally. So Derry Hannam, he's signed this petition. So yeah.
He's recently written a book, Another Way is Possible, and he's very pro public education. The two of us have the concern that as people move more and more to the private system, leaves behind the people with less choice, less privilege, and so you end up even more ghettoizing the public system.
Yeah, that's a fantastic discussion we have with one teacher who's a fantastic supporter of nearly all of our ideas. But when I told her that principals need to be free to set up the profile of their school, they need to design their school to their own vision, and if they are to accomplish their own vision, they also have to be free to set up the selection criteria for the school, which she considers highly discriminatory, and she uses similar arguments like you, also worrying about, she supports the school vouchers, but worries that wrongly designed school vouchers could lead to this kind of ghettoization. However, I think we are now so, this market for education ideas is so fragmented. It's becoming a perfectly competitive market. In other words, if there are needs, they'll be satisfied. That's an ideal situation. So when you express your worry, perhaps that would be the correct statement in the 1980s or 1990s. Now with the online tools, with the new options, with the possibility to learn by yourself at home with a computer, this market is becoming a perfectly competitive market. In other words, if a child says, I want, someone will say, yeah, I'll do that for you. Give me your school voucher. In other words, we have market rules, we have competition. However, it is the child who's the boss.
And so, if I can interject here, when I talk about public education, I'm talking about publicly funded education. I'm not talking about a centrally managed system that stereotypes.
Okay. So practically, we have a major confusion because I speak about public schools, while school vouchers make all education public in a sense, because it's all government funded.
Yes, yeah, yes, and so we're consistent on that. The vision that I have when we talk about communities of learners is I'm drawing a lot on Yakovech here with communities of learners, and he says that, and so if we think of public education as being publicly funded community learning communities of learners, publicly funded, we take his concept of democratic schools, and he says no two democratic schools are the same, because we're not just creating another cookie cutter, creating the opportunity for the learner to have the choices that they need to be the learners that they want to be, to learn the things that they want to learn. And so we're really just freeing people up to pursue the learning that they want with public money.
But I became curious about our little confusion about the term public school. What would be the definition of a public school in Canada?
Right now, it's that a centrally organized monopoly that people have little choice unless they have money or some kind of privilege.
So your definition is a goal, is a target. That's what you envision for the future. Public education.
Yes, the vision that I have is of a transformed system along the lines of what I just described, that it's decentralized, where right down to the learner having a platform in their community to be among a community of learners, but to reach out to the whole world. Daniel Greenberg said that the goal of their school is to bring the real world to the attention of the students, and so that's well beyond the walls of any one school or one community. It's creating a community of learners where people are reaching out and they're enriching their neighbors and their friends with everything that they're learning elsewhere. So we get away from this uniformity and conformity of curriculum and really celebrate diversity.
Richard, we had a fantastic discussion, lots of material to think about. We have 2 days of hope, lots of sound bites. I think it was an extremely productive meeting. I am ecstatic.
I'm very encouraged and hope that globally we can work together on this idea of student strikes and maybe orchestrate something that will grab world attention by next year, November 20th.
Well, we have almost 50 weeks to that point, potentially 50 meetings, 4 ideas.
And many more people out there that would like to support this idea in their whole variety of ways. So those who take something from a negative point of view, pointing out all the problems, that they're as welcome to help with this whole change process as the people who are positively oriented and want to take a plus. Let's build on this great idea. Just involve as many people as we can in the ways that they want to be involved. So that's where choice comes in again. How do you choose to help make this change happen? And just support people to pursue it in whatever way is most meaningful to them.
Today evening, I plan to write a little report on our meeting. I'll send it to you for review because lots of facts and ideas came from your head. I'm not sure I got all the labels and names correctly or dates. So I made a few notes on this. And I presume it's early morning at your place. So by the time I write it, probably still be able to read it.
It's
Lovely.
about 9:30 here, so I still have a lot of day left to.
Wow, fantastic. So I'm leaving for football and using the last moments of daylight. So it's a little bit later at our place.
Well, this has been great. Really enjoyed this and
Yeah.
hearing comments from others who are on the call and hope we can keep expanding our numbers and our involvement in this to really come together for change.
Yeah. Fantastic, guys. Thank you for coming. I hereby officially close the meeting. Richard, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
very worthwhile.